In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Grizzlies beat writer Drew Hill, joined as always by columnist Chris Herrington. Live, not live, because this is the podcast. That was really dumb. That was a very dumb way to start this podcast.
On location.
On location. Thank you. First assist of the season.
Yep.
On location. From Nashville, Tennessee, right around the campus of Belmont University, where the Memphis Grizzlies are having training camp. It's unbelievable to think the season's here. I mean, it has felt like this has been a long off season because there was a lot of changes, and then there's been a whole lot of talking and not a lot of actual action. But like in less than a week, the Grizzlies are going to be on the court playing basketball against another team. That's pretty crazy to think about at this point. We're almost here, Chris.
Not only do we have the first assist of the season on the podcast, we have the first, game-winning shot maybe from John Morant with the I Like Memphis was a pretty good shot. And
amazing.
And the Belmont T-shirt, the Murray State T-shirt at Belmont University is a pretty good shot.
Yeah. No, we did have media day on Monday in Memphis before we came here. And it's funny because, I thought it was a fine media day, but I didn't think Ja in particular, stole the show. And that was kind of a good thing, right? I was like, what does he need to say? There's not a ton he needs to say. And then he gets to Belmont, and it's like he's actually on the court. He's not doing the media. He's doing the media stuff as an attachment to practice, right?
Right.
And he was great. He was great yesterday. And we were laughing about this at dinner last night, a masterful answer on do you enjoy your time in Nashville, which was an unintentionally very loaded question that should not be. If
Right.
that makes, in my opinion, should not be. You're allowed to like both places.
I agree.
You are allowed to like both places. Some Memphians might disagree with that. But anyway, Ja puts on a masterful answer in which he says something to the effect of, "It's different. We really appreciate everybody who hosts us in Nashville and gives us a chance to have this week to prepare for the season. It's nice. I like Memphis though." that was the I like Memphis though was an incredible way to finish off that quote and give a masterful performance with the media in his first.
Well, and the thing about the Murray State shirt, in context, people don't know. Ja obviously went to Murray State. I think it's in the same conference as Belmont, so there's history there. It's not like he practiced in the Belmont T-shirt. He went to put that on to do the media.
Right. He didn't have a shirt on. He grabbed the Murray State shirt.
Right.
He pulled it down to make sure you could see the logo before he was about to be on camera at Belmont, which was funny. And then proceeded to trash talk Belmont and talk about when they beat them in the conference championship game. And then TSU as well, just because TSU's around the corner. He's like, we beat them by 40, but I wasn't going to bring that up,
He did note he was gracious enough not to bring his rings.
Yeah, he did. I didn't include that in the story. I forgot to include that. That was at the end. Yeah, he said he thought about wearing his OVC championship rings. That was good stuff. Good stuff yesterday. Well, we did have media day. Zach Kleiman spoke. Everybody spoke on the Grizzlies, except for Brandon Clark, who was having his procedure to clean up synovitis, I think is the exact terminology there, in his knee. And he is expected to be reevaluated in 6 weeks. So that's obviously a blow for the Grizzlies front court. It was the news of the week until we got to media day. Um, I want to go one by one through some of these guys, Chris, and talk about what they had to say for media day. But first, your thoughts on the news of the week, which is Brandon Clark. Well, we got more injury updates than that, but most of them, I think, um, were about what we thought. But the big
Yeah,
news was Brandon Clark's out for will be reevaluated in 6 weeks.
yeah, the Jaren Jackson and Zach Edey updates. I mean, those were known. We knew Jaren was sort of a jump ball to start the season, to be available opening night or not. I think we sort of already knew that, and that remains the case. And we knew Zach Edey was going to miss the start of the season, and his absence would carry into the season to some meaningful extent. And so we confirmation of that. I think on both of those, the updates we got were about as positive as they could reasonably be, and that they're both cleared to begin the ramp up. And then we got the timetables. We did see briefly Jaren Jackson Jr. going through an individual workout after practice yesterday. We had to see it through a closed door, but we did see it. That was good to see. The Brandon Clark thing's a bummer though, and I have some concern about the Brandon Clark and the Zach Edey injury overlap and the absence overlap, I should say, of those two guys for at least the first month of the season. For at least a month, Grizzlies will be without both, and you hope you get at least one back pretty soon after that. But I think the team was already fair. I know Zach Kleiman said on Monday, we like our depth in the front court. I thought the team was a little shy. I thought the roster was a little imbalanced and a little thin up front before the Brandon Clark news. And so I have some concern about the Grizzlies starting the season with both of those guys out and how they account for that. And when I think about, projecting the Grizzlies this season, and we still got a few more weeks before we have to nail down, some kind of prediction that doesn't matter. But I'm more concerned about the preponderance of injuries in the front court than I am about the loss of Desmond Bane in terms of what the Grizzlies will or won't do this season.
The way I sort of view the front court is a short-term challenge, obviously, or you hope to be a short-term challenge. There's different
Right.
windows for those different guys. Getting Jaren back is so critical to that equation because he can play the five and play the four, and you can sort of move him around. I think if Jaren's you're thin, but you at least have a star player and a productive player in that spot if he is able to go when the season begins. And then right now, I'm just looking at Jock Landale going, I guess you're the guy, man. Like, I think PJ Hall's going to play some at the beginning of the season. Santi Aldama got asked yesterday about if he's preparing to play center minutes, and he essentially was like,
No.
no.
Right.
Like, I haven't played center at all,
No,
Um,
that's a good question. If Jaren's not there opening night, like you got to fill 48 minutes at the center spot, and if Santi's not playing center, you mentioned PJ Hall. I think he's much smaller, but I think Omax Prosper. I'll be interested to see who plays more, PJ Hall or Omax Prosper. I think one of them will probably play uh, to start the season.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely going to be the case. So um, that obviously was big news on the injury front with the Grizzlies. And I wrote about Jock Landale
Yeah,
yesterday, but there's no sense in saving it. So let's just talk a little Jock real quick. Um, I thought he was a pretty good interview, first of all, for Media Day. He had a lot to say. He talked about learning from Steven Adams and just Steven being willing to give him advice about all things Memphis, whether that be places to live in the city, places to go, people to talk to, places to hunt and fish because they are outdoorsmen from Australia and New Zealand, right? Um,
Do
he's
we know if Steven Adams did any hunting in the Mid South? I'm skeptical of that. Have we seen any evidence of that?
I don't know.
I don't think I've ever seen evidence of that.
I know he was doing some hunting in exotic places that he
Well,
was
yeah.
traveling to.
No, but I mean in the Memphis area.
I don't know.
Was he out in a duck
It's a good
blind in a
question.
muddy Mississippi field somewhere? Or was he up in a deer stand? I kind of doubt it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Um, Anyway, so Jock talked about Steven Adams' impact and how he was really thankful to have him through this process. At the same time, Steven Adams took his job, right? Steven Adams gets traded to Houston. The Grizzlies do the salary dump thing at the 2 seasons ago around the trade deadline. And he gets there, and Jock Landale, who had played at not hadn't wasn't playing a ton, but was playing a lot more frequently than he was after Steven Adams was there and healthy enough to play.
Right.
Steven Adams came in and sort of took Jock's spot in the rotation, and then Jock talked about it in his introductory. Well, it was his introductory press conference. Was media day. That was the first time he had talked, and he essentially said, "Look, I was looking for opportunity. Right, that was for me the what I wanted in this situation, and it's what Memphis could present." And he went on to sort of uh, say that he signed 4 hours after his child was born, which was wild, and that it was kind of like this big whirlwind. Um, and I do think that if you're searching for things to like about Jock and you're searching for things to sort of make you feel better about the Grizzlies front court situation in terms of like his dependability to be on an NBA basketball court and have some sort of positive impact, you don't have to search very far for that. Like I think that there's a possibility that Jock what wasn't playing a lot of minutes, but was undervalued and could have been playing more minutes, just wasn't in a good situation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think what was interesting, and this came through more when Jock Landale spoke, even than when Islo spoke earlier in the day. Islo, sort of talked about pace and intensity and sort of broader sort of concepts. He didn't really talk about specifics. We had a certain idea of what we thought those specifics meant, and then they sort of got confirmed by other players throughout the day, most notably Jock Landale. And to me, what came across was they seemed to be the organization and Landale and signing here seem to be very much on the same page, and they seem to have a very a firm understanding about an initially significant but well-defined role, which is the dude just came out and said, "I love to screen, I love to offensive rebound, I love to play defense." Like he's like, I'm here for this job. This is what the job is, and I embrace this. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm here for. He's not going to be spreading the floor and taking trail threes, and he's not going to be a hub of high post offense. He's going to screen for John Morant and other people, but notably John Morant. He's going to crash the boards. He's going to play defense, and that's what they want in their center. And if he can do those three things effectively, not only will he likely start the season and play significant minutes, probably the longest stretch of significant minutes, because he's only started like 12 games, I think, 11 or 12 games in 4 seasons. I wrote this at some point. Not only will he have the longest stretch of sustained play of his NBA career, if he does those things well, he'll probably still be in the rotation after Edie comes back. And so it is a real opportunity for Jock Landale. And I thought it was interesting to hear him talk about, it's interesting. It's such a privilege even to be in the NBA. Very few basketball players get to that level just by nature of being in the NBA. You're making loads of money no matter who you are. The lowest paid player in the NBA is making loads of money. So it's like it's a great thing to be able to achieve in your life. But at the same time, basketball careers are brief. And if you're in your prime and you're getting paid a lot of money and sitting on the bench and not playing, that there's a limit to how fulfilling that is. So I thought it was really interesting to hear him say, like, he just really wanted an opportunity to really play and not just sit on the bench. And I think it just all came together for him, for the team, and the fit. And, it's all theoretical right now, but it's got a chance to be a real meaningful thing for player and team.
Yeah, Zach Kleiman said it was a priority to get Jock Landale in the offseason. And obviously the team traded away Jay Huff to try to to open a spot to sign
Right.
a different type of center, a different style of center, which is what they got in Jock. And you know, I'm not going to pretend to be the ultimate like numbers analytics guy, but I do know some of the statistics that some of these teams pay attention to when it comes to like advanced analytics. And stats that measure impact on plus and minus and account for the other team, the players on the other team that are on the floor and your teammates that are on the floor with you. They're not perfect, But I will say that Jock Landale, at least in some of the advanced numbers, looks good, looks impactful. And again, not perfect, but sometimes there have been players in the past, like one that people bring up all the time in this sort of equation is Derek White. Like Derek White was very undervalued on the Spurs, who were not a good team, but he had very good impact numbers. Now look, Jock's about to be 30. He's like not on his way to superstardom at all. But I think there's a scenario in which he is undervalued. And so that's sort of what I wrote about over at the Daily Memphian yesterday following practice. We also talked to Ja about it. Ja said, that they really appreciate the players that do the things that don't show up in the box score. And, that for him and Jock, it's going to be a lot about reps this preseason because, they're both vets. They both know how to communicate and pick and roll, that sort of thing, but they haven't done it together. And they're going to be, they're going to be he's going to be setting a lot of screens for Ja when the season starts. So they better start getting some practice now on that. Well, I think that handles our front court injury thing. Do we want to go one by one? Do you want to go, unless you have something else you want to add,
Yeah,
Chris?
we probably don't have time to go through everybody, but you can throw some
Let,
stuff out
let,
there.
let's
Yeah.
go. Let's go through some of these players, and then let's answer a few questions from listeners here on the pod. Um, all right, let's start with Zach Kleiman. Media day. Zach Kleiman talks. What, if anything, did you find notable about what Zach Kleiman had to say?
I guess nothing terribly notable that I can remember. He did say that he thought this team was capable of surprising and doing better than maybe the consensus has them doing. I think the consensus generally has the Grizzlies as a play-in team and maybe even a lower end play-in team. Well, we'll see when final predictions come out, but I think most people are going to have the Grizzlies in that 8 to 11 range, probably of the West. And he sort of suggested that he thought the potential was higher for that, which you would assume he would think that. He put together the team. But I don't remember anything else. And I tried to sort of push him on like what constitutes success this season, or not even that. What constitutes a plan that is working, with the idea that they are reshaping the team around John Morant and Jaren Jackson, and they're doing it over the course, I think, of at least a couple years, given that the most valuable thing they got back from the Desmond Bane trade they haven't used yet, which is a pick next summer. Um, he didn't really have a clear
He
answer to
didn't
that.
really answer that.
I don't
Yeah.
know, but I don't know if he could. I don't know if there is a clear answer to that. I mean, to me, it is a wait and see, evaluate as you go situation.
Yeah. No. That certainly was. That's what's on the top of the mind now, right? We've talked about what this season means and what will be important, and we've used the example of that this team could be building towards something new, or they could be getting on the off ramp, right? And finding
Yeah,
a different building path. It doesn't have to be this season that they make that decision, but that decision's eventually going to come. And basically, what Zach Kleiman suggested is that we get too caught up in the language of that, right? Rebuild versus retool versus, he essentially was like, I'm less worried about that. And I'm just trying to build a championship team. I think some of them still apply, but what did you make of the comments about, I forget what question it was that led to that answer, but he gave an answer that essentially said, we worry too much about, the type of language we're going to use when it comes to trying to build a team that can win a championship.
I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, he's just trying to. I don't know. I don't want to suggest what he's trying to do. I don't know. Honestly, I just don't. I don't really have an answer to that question.
I didn't know what to make of it either. But he essentially was talking about when you're building a championship contender and you're searching for these highest end outcomes, you do what's necessary to try to reach those outcomes.
Well, this is sort of what I meant, sort of about evaluate along the way, and I think he was mostly trying to reject someone else's framing. In this case, sort of my framing, probably, which I appreciate. As a writer, I like to choose my own words, not have other people like choose words for me. So I think he's just sort of rejecting like framing given to him and trying to keep it open to describe things how he wants to describe them.
The other open or media day, I should say, thing that I think Zach Kleiman opened up a little bit about was Ja Morant, who he said, Ja, it's a big season for him sort of, acknowledged that and also said he believes that Ja will have a big season. I think it's not insignificant to acknowledge that that this is an important season for Ja. We've been writing about it a lot, talking about it, and whether or not he will um, get an extension beyond this season doesn't seem like it's likely to happen this summer now at this stage, but like he will still be eligible for another extension, you know, next off season. Um, it does feel like it's a big season for Ja. He hasn't played in a ton over the last two seasons, and he's trying to sort of reestablish himself in that top level of all-star player across the league. So what did you make of Zach sort of saying, yeah, this is a big season for Ja, and I expect that it's going to go well?
I mean, you would he's not going to say I don't think it'll be a big season for John. I don't think it'll go well, and so I think that's it's really not saying much. I, I think the contract extension thing it's a fact that he is eligible for a contract extension, and we're not entirely privy to what conversations, if any, have gone on between Morant's camp and the team about that. But nothing has bubbled up to the surface about that if there have been internal discussions. And to me, he has 3 years left on his contract. To me, it doesn't need to be an issue this summer. Um, and if I'm the Grizzlies, I'm not looking to I'm not in a hurry to wrap him up on an extension when I already have him for 3 more years already. And so to me, it's not really an issue unless Ja wants to make it an issue. And there's no evidence he's made it an issue. So to me, it's just fine for it to be something that's tabled until next summer.
Okay, let's move on to a few other players, but first let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
Jaren Jackson, what did you make of his his press conference at Media Day? Thought there were some interesting answers in there. Maybe not about stuff that exactly applies to the basketball on the court, but the stuff he had to say about the All-Star game, the stuff he had to say about his jersey number change. What did you make of Jaren's Media Day appearance?
Well, Jared is just pretty much engaging and thoughtful all the time, and it's interesting to watch how he's grown in those settings. From I don't know if you were there his rookie year for the first media day of his career when I think he was still 19, and he was just goopy. He came across as a teenager. He was talking about his Netflix shows and it wasn't immature in a bad way, but it was just like the youth was apparent. And he's still sort of, funny and engaging, but there's a more mature, reflective part of it now. And so I thought Jaron was great. And the All-Star answer was great, and it's sort of tangential to Grizzlies specific interests. If there are people around the NBA who want to dive into the crisis of the All-Star game, I think I would point them to Jaren Jackson Jr.'s long answer at Grizzlies Media Day for some insight on this. He basically pointed out why it's not conducive to the highly competitive basketball people want to see, and how suggested maybe that's not really what we need out of the All-Star game anyway. In terms of other stuff, I mean that's the thing that jumps out the most. But I just thought he was just really good. I liked near the end when he said something like, you know, novelty is fun, and what he meant by that was sort of change. Like every team is a little bit different every season. No team brings back 1 through 15, and even if you do, everyone's a year older. Like people change, and he just sort of embraced the idea of having new teammates and new coach and new stuff, and like the idea that change itself can sort of be refreshing and interesting. And I think that's a good approach for him to have as a player, and I think it's a good approach for fans to have with the team, like every year.
Yeah, I think he said novelty is fun also in relation to the jersey change, which
Right.
I thought it was interesting for him to talk about that. I mean, he had made it news long before and done interviews talking about the jersey change, but um, he talked about eight meaning number 8, which is what he's wearing now, meaning rebirth or renewed, or and that's eventually how he got to the novelty is fun answer. Um, like it's fun to change things up, and I think that I really liked that reflection that he had there, just about, it's significant for my dad for us to be able to share a number again. And I did share a number with him in college. And, you know, um, this will have meaning that I can't really explain, but I like it. And that's why I want to do it. And so I thought Jaron was great as always from Media Day. Any others that stood out? What other interviews, if any, stood out to you from Media Day, Chris?
I thought Ty Jerome came across very well. Also very thoughtful, very composed. Cedric Howard, as an engaging personality, but also seems pretty mature for a guy his age. So I think, I mean, those two jumped out to me. Zach Eady was pretty soft spoken.
Zach Edey said it feels like Groundhog's Day.
Yeah, that was a good one. It was like Groundhog's Day. It wasn't like the lift of a driving dream exactly, but that's an honest thing. It's like, I'm restricted because of the rehab from this injury, and so I can't get on the court. So it's every day I get up, I do my lifting, I do my, whatever, my cardio, I watch film, and it's like, there's not a lot of variety for him. It's this, he does what he can do, and he does it every day, but he hasn't been able to break out of what he can do. Hopefully that'll start changing. Since he has been cleared to ramp up, hopefully he'll be out on the floor doing more going forward than he's been able to do this summer.
Yeah. We should pause on Ty Jerome for a second. I thought he was a very good interview. Um, and he talked a lot about his fit. Um, and I think that the Grizzlies really sold him on that. And that was immediately, I'm thinking back to the summer when they signed him. People were questioning the fit. I don't think they're questioning the fit anymore. But they wondered how he was going to work as a primary ball handler. And he doesn't really have to be for the Grizzlies, but he can be, I think. And when you put him alongside Jaren, or sorry, excuse me, Ja and Scottie Pippen, it seems like Zach Kleiman in particular was really encouraged by what they're going to have in terms of backcourt depth, going into the season.
Well, they are in great shape to survive absences by any one of those three players. And we know Ja has a history of missing games. You hope it's less than it's been recently, but no one expects Ja Morant to play 82. Ty Jerome has his own sort of injury past, which he alluded to. And so they are very well equipped to get by when one of those three players is out. I think it'll be interesting to see how it works when all those three players are available, which is a more optimal setting. But Ty Jerome talked about, in Cleveland, they basically played a three-guard rotation with the two starters, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and then him. And that gave him a lot of opportunity, enough opportunity to finish third and sixth man of the year. The Grizzlies are not going to play a three-guard rotation of Morant, Jerome, and Pippen because they're probably going to start Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who's more of a wing at the two, and they have all these other guys. They have Pope and they have Caldwell Pope and
Jalen
they have
Wells.
Jalen Wells and Cedric Howard and Vince Williams and so it'll be really interesting to see how the minutes and roles sort of come out because from a sheer quality standpoint, Morant's a given, obviously, but Ty Jerome and Scottie Pippen both should have major roles on this team. If you're just trying to get your best players on the floor, like those guys, need significant minutes and touches.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Okay, let's answer some questions before we get out of here that I took while we were in the car on the way to Nashville from Memphis yesterday. First question is our colleague Sam Hardiman, who wants to know who gets the aux cord when we are in the car together. I think the answer is Chris on this.
I did the rental. I'm the only one who can drive it. Driver, and I
Yep.
don't know how it works in your household. In my household, the driver gets the cord. And so if we're on a family road trip and my wife drives and she gets to put on whatever she wants, and if I'm driving, I put on what I want. But a
Yeah.
good driver is considerate to the other people in the car, and so you're trying to like find something amenable to everyone.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is true. And look, I would never ask for that. Like, you're the one that's the music guy. writer, you know. I think you probably listen to more national NBA podcasts than I do, so you know which ones are good. Um, so we were listening to Zach Lowe's podcast in the car on the way to Nashville this week. What else? We listened to some music a little bit.
We switched to my best of 2025 Spotify mix, and we were good with
Yeah,
that.
and it was good, and we talked about different genres of music and different stuff. But no,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have the expectation to have the aux cord if I'm just a passenger in a rental car. That I would expect Chris. Chris almost has to host in that sense. Like I don't want to have it. He has to have it.
Right.
And he's good at that. So that's fine. All right. Parker Fleming asks, everyone talks about how Isolo teams shoot a lot of threes. How do you see threes being distributed? If I set an over under of 1.5 players averaging 6+ 3-point attempts per game, would you go over or under?
But what were those numbers again?
If you set an over under of 1.5 players averaging 6+ 3-point attempts per game, would you go over or under?
Um,
Are two guys going to shoot six a game?
I mean, I'd have to commit that to some study, but off the top of my head, I'm thinking under just based on the depth of the rotation I expect them to play. I think when you look at last season, when they had these different assistants and there was all this weirdness of like, Isolo's your lead assistant, but you're running the other guy's system. They were running the other guy's system in terms of like scheme, but in terms of pace and depth and rotation and substitution pattern and all of that, I think that was Isolo's stuff. It's also but sort of the way Jenkins does anyway, but I think that's going to carry over. So I think they're going to play like another 11-man rotation, and like you're not going to have a lot of guys playing heavy minutes. And so I don't know how many guys, even who shoot a lot of threes, are going to get up 7 a game if they're playing 24 minutes. So I guess I'd take the under on that. The other thing I would say, and this sort of rhymes with the idea that they're going to shoot a lot of threes, to me rhymes with if there was a talking point of the day at the first day of training camp, it was speed. And
Hmm.
like every training camp in the history of man talks about playing fast. Mike Fratello once talked about playing fast, the king of slowdown. But like the Grizzlies already play fast. The Grizzlies were number one in the NBA in pace last season. So yeah, they're going to play fast and shoot a lot of threes. Partly because like that's the way they want to play and that's the way they've wanted to play, but partly because like they're an NBA basketball team in 2025. That's just the game. So yeah, sure they're going to shoot a lot of threes, but I don't. Again, I would take the under on that without studying it just because of the minutes played per player.
Yeah, it's the distribution part of it that's interesting. Not
Right.
like I don't doubt at all that they're going to shoot threes. And let's remember, Isolo, very clearly a math guy, talking all the way about why you want to play fast and the mathematical advantages and the efficiency differences between getting X amount of shots and whatnot. And like Ty Jerome, same way. Ty Jerome talked about all the best types of shots, and like Ty Jerome was a walking billboard for Isolo, I felt like at Media Day. But I have no doubts that this team's going to shoot a lot of threes. Like because if you're going to play at that speed, you just are. The real question here is the distribution. Like
Right.
who is the most likely of those players to get 6 3-point attempts up a game? Maybe a more interesting question. Like, is Jerome going to be on the court? Who's probably their best shooter now? Is he going to be on the court enough to get six up?
That's
Jalen
the
Wells,
thing.
is he going to get
Yeah.
six up? Those are the two I go to first. But
Yeah. I
you know,
think I think Jerome. I think Jerome Wells, as you mentioned, Jerome Wells, but also Caldwell Pope and Pippen are all going to shoot a, a, a lot of threes relative to their playing time and a heavy percentage of threes within their shot distribution. Probably especially Caldwell Pope because he's not going to put the ball on the floor as much. But that gets into like usage and minutes and all of that. Um, in terms of like threes per minute on the floor, like I don't know, maybe that is Ty Jerome. Maybe that is the most. The one guy I'm interested in is actually Jaron. I think
I was going to go there. Yeah, I
he
wonder
shot
how many.
38% from three last season, which is I think the second best of his career. He's had some years where it's been subpar too, so it's fluctuated. But he's a combo big, and so the bar is a little bit lower for good 3-point shooting relative to the position. And I think Jaren's 3-point shooting is a plus, and it's also something that doesn't so much is going to be asked of him on both ends of the floor. getting up threes doesn't take as much energy, as some of the defense stuff and some of the other on-ball stuff he's going to do. And I'm someone who thinks that he should take more threes this season than he did last season.
Yeah, I agree. Michael Silliman asks, "Is
Oh,
Edie the?"
we didn't mention Santi though.
Oh yeah, Santi, but he's
It-
not getting six up a game. I wouldn't think
well,
that'd be a lot.
with if Edie and Clark are out and he's playing 34 minutes a game to start the season, he might.
Yeah, yeah, maybe at the beginning of the season. I don't know if he'll
Yeah,
average it by the end.
right.
Michael Silliman made a joke. Is Edie the human vertical route in the air raid offense? Obviously, he is referencing to Isla talking about how he's using football, American football, I guess, for him as a way to sort of study decision making and forcing defenses to make quick decisions. And he was talking about how he's watching Sunday Night Football for the first time in his life. And look, I don't know what to make of that. To be honest with you, I don't know what to think about them just like studying other teams' sports and figuring out how it all works. I'm sure there is some level of psychology that exists there that is useful for them. I wouldn't know what it is. But I find it great for Isla that he's watching Sunday Night Football. Who doesn't love a good Sunday Night Football game? I'm glad our Finnish head coach is getting a chance to enjoy that.
Yeah, I mean that definitely, like, he was playing to the room, I guess, a little bit with that. But I would think, and I know very little about soccer, but his more native football, I think, is more probably conducive to like basketball in terms of thinking about flow and movement and advantage and that kind of stuff. But take whatever you can get
Didn't
wherever you can get it.
didn't Taylor Jenkins say something about this type of thing
Probably.
last year?
He
Yeah.
talked about spending the summer looking at other sports and thinking about,
Yeah, that's right. He did.
the idea of advantage creation, which is sort of a recent basketball lingo. And Islo did not deploy that or much other jargon the last couple of days, but that's something that has become in vogue, that phrase, advantage creation. And that's something that, I think coaches look across sports to see how that's done.
Okay, a few more. I take it you're not in on the conspiracy theory that the league's trying to tank the Grizzlies' attendance because they only gave them one Lakers home game, one Warriors home game, and no Bane game and no MLK. In or
I'm
out
not.
on that theory?
I'm not on the. I think that's. I don't think that's a good outcome for the Grizzlies' home schedule. But I don't think it's very difficult to put together those schedules, and there are a lot of them are done with computer programs anyway. I don't think anyone in the league office was consciously trying to do that. No.
I think the league gave the Grizzlies a pretty good thing in giving them those international games. So I think it's on the fans and the team to deliver a product good enough to put butts in seats, and
Well,
that's
let
where
me say something about that because I'm hearing a lot of this, and I think we're going to hear more of that kind of thing. You
it's hard to
can't.
tell people how to spend their money, though.
I'm not interested in telling anybody to spend their money, but in broad terms, the idea that as a community you support the team if it's good. This is the NBA. It's not college. It's not a
Mhm.
college sport where like there are some teams that have inherent advantages and they should expect to be good all the time. You're going to be bad. There are times where you're going to be bad, and you're not going to be bad because like you failed as a team or an organization. Now, if you stay bad for a long time, it's because you failed as a team or an organization. But everyone's going to have ups and downs. That's the way pro sports works. It is inherent to pro sports to have ups and downs. And the idea that a community will only support a team if the team is good, guess what? That's a recipe for not having a team. That is not the way. That's not the way pro sports works,
Yes.
or should
No,
work.
well, I agree with that, but I think we'd be being intentionally ignorant if we didn't just acknowledge that this is the way that it works everywhere across the country. In almost everywhere, I should say. There are some exceptions, but like, when teams are better, more people will go to the games. That's just a fact,
Well,
right? When teams are successful, more people go to the games. More people are willing to pay more money to go to those games. Like
yes,
that's just the
but
reality.
to a degree. But when you look at the smaller market and single market franchises that have had success as entities and cities over long time frames, the Portland Trailblazers, the San Antonio Spurs, the Utah Jazz, et cetera, et cetera. those teams, especially the Blazers and Jazz, they go through ups and downs competitively, and it's not that wild of a roller coaster in terms of fan interest and fan support. The support is there. I'm not saying it doesn't fluctuate at all. It does, but the support is there in a significant way, regardless. And that's just the way pro sports has to be in a market if you want to have a team in a market. I just, and I
Yeah.
preach that from day one.
No, I think that is true, and I think there's no better example of that than Oklahoma City, who had the worst team in the NBA and showed up for the worst team in the NBA, then has the best team in the NBA, and has continued to show up for the best team in the NBA. Okay, onward. The internet needs your take, Chris, on Zach Edey's Harry Potter wallet.
So I didn't notice this until you pointed it out, and I had seen the video. I thought the video was kind of charming, actually, of him being dressed down by the female state trooper and him, trying to talk his way out of it, but not very much, and basically just taking his punishment, taking his lecture as he should have. I give Zach Edey props for like, he didn't try to say, "Don't you know who I am?" or any of that. Like he was sort of sheepish about it. But I did not notice the Harry Potter wallet. And I gotta say, I think, I think maybe he's the third Lopez brother. He's the brother from another mother for the Lopez guys, who love the Disney and the all of that. It sort of fits the big man personality a little bit.
I mean, yeah, no, there's some charm to it. It's already, he's already driving a Kia. And and
Right.
and he's got the Harry Potter wallet. I can totally respect a guy that likes what he likes, even if he's got the money to have something nicer. Just get the Harry Potter wallet. Just use the Harry Potter wallet. What's the need to go buy one from Gucci like Dylan Brooks? If you got the Harry Potter one and it works perfectly fine, use the Harry Potter one. And maybe he's just a big Harry Potter fan. So I'm in. I'm in on the Harry Potter wallet. I like the Harry Potter wallet. Uh, Good for Zach Edey with the Harry Potter wallet. Do the Grizzlies plan to install a post offense? Post up frequency in games under Isola last year doubled, similar to pick and roll and dribble handoffs. The Grizzlies did struggle playing out of the post as they were doubled consistently and struggled to play out of those doubles. Um, Essentially, do you think do you see this team using more post ups this year?
I mean, you just sort of throw in evidence at me that I'm sort of taking on face value because I haven't looked at it. I assume the implication there is that post frequency when Isola was the head coach for 9 regular season games doubled what it had been earlier the previous season. I assume that's what that. I don't know if that's what he's saying. Like what? I don't know what two numbers he's comparing. I assume that's what he's comparing. The games where Isola was the head coach versus the games last season before he was the head coach, and and that may have as much to do with the before as the after because they had run a very unusual offensive system in which the numbers for lots of different play types like plummeted, right? And so I don't know if that tells you much about Islo as it tells you about the system they were running before he became head coach. So I don't know. We haven't heard a lot of talk about post stuff. In the playoffs, they did run a lot of post stuff for Jaron, and they sort of like took what the defense gave them in terms of Jaron. And when Jaron had a small guy on him, they were running post stuff, which frankly was what Oklahoma City wanted them to do. I don't know if that was still the right move. But I don't know that post stuff is going to be prominent in what they do. But I don't think it's not going to be as radical looking as the beginning of last season. And so I don't know where they'll finish in the league. The fact that they have some good big players suggests they probably won't be at the bottom of the league in post ups. There's been no indication like that's a focus.
Yeah, no, I don't think that that's been something that's been talked about a lot, but it'll be they'll do it more frequently than they did at the beginning of last season for sure, based on just the style of offense that they're running. A couple more before we get out of here. Um, One was who is the backup center on his team right now? Who's going to play backup center? And that was from our friend Matt Moore.
It's Jaron. I mean, if Jaron's healthy, it's Jaron. He's the starting power forward in the backup center, right? Like when Lando comes off the floor, Jaron plays the five, and then you have Gigi Jackson or smaller people there. I think that's what they would do. If they're not going to do that, then it's going to be PJ Hall or it's going to be some small ball lineups with like, Obex Prosper is a small ball center. But I think if Jaron's healthy until Edie and Clark comes back, Jaron is effectively your backup center. Know what I'm
Yeah, I
saying?
think that's the hope. That's the hope is that Jaron will be ready on night one, and Jaron will be, yeah, your backup center. It's going to be Landell, Jaron, and PJ Hall until they can put more bodies on the court. And like Santi, again, just to rehash that, Santi got asked if he's prepared to play the five, and he basically said no, like I'm not playing center. So sounds like those are going to be the guys that you're working with for now. All right, last one. Will Ja and Jaren establish a two-man game this year? I do think you're going to see Jaren screen for Ja more often. I think that's something that they're working on, um, a lot this preseason. That's something that Isolo pointed out. So I think you'll see more of it than you have in the past. What do you think?
Well, this is a subject I'm in the middle of writing about as we take a break to pod a little bit, and so maybe it'll be up by the time people listen to this. It's something it's something that showed promise early on in their pairing, and then the team really went away from it. That two-man game, it went away from it from different reasons because you had Jonas Valanciunas, you had Steven Adams, you had more effective screeners, and Jaren was an effective spacer, and it sort of made sense in the flow of the offense. But you got away from that pick and roll, pick and pop promise that you had during Ja's rookie season and Jaren's second season. And Jaren's growth as a scorer the last 2 years has been in environmental situations that probably won't be replicated this season. In fact, they don't want to be replicated because one of those was the absence of John Morant 2 years ago when he grew as a scorer because Ja wasn't playing and he was like, they were running it a lot through him. And then last season, it was that system early on that stayed away from interaction. They tried to keep players spaced. So they tried to keep players away from each other. And I think this year, now going into this season with Edie out, there is more suggestion. And Isolo brought this up and Morant both brought this up yesterday first day of training camp. They both separately talked about doing more screening stuff with Jaren. And they both talked about that is something he's not used to doing. So that came up. So that is something they're clearly working on in training camp. And I think you'll see Jaren used in all kinds of ways, including a lot of the ways he's been used the past couple seasons. But it does sound like they're going to try to incorporate more direct interaction with Morant and Jackson and get back to something that I think everyone thought was going to be bread and butter 6 years ago, and it just didn't become that.
Yep. So make sure you go check that out and read that at the Daily Memphian. If you want to read what I wrote about Jock Landale and Ja, you can go check that out on the website as well. I feel like this is a preseason game for me, Chris. I'm halfway into podcast mode. This is my ramp up for the season. So we'll go back to potting every week now, I think, at this point, since preseason will start on Monday. So make sure you are checking back every week to listen to our Grizzlies podcast. All right, well, that'll do it for us this week. We'll be back. For Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.